Eccoci, dalla regia mi danno l'ok per cominciare. Chiedo alle persone in sala per favore di prendere posto.
So we can start. I invite all the attendees to join us. We start with the panel, what institutions do and what they could do to make the digital environment safer for children. So this is the afternoon session that is starting with this big question. We had an intense morning session, and this is a panel where, thanks to this hybrid format, we can have people joining us from different countries around the world. And we have attendees. We have different institutions and civil society that are focused on a child-safe digital world. I would like to give the floor to Guido Scorza, member of the Italian Authority for Data Protection. Good afternoon, good evening, good day. I don't know where you are. However, welcome to this very long 2 days marathon. I think that the only introduction that we can do is what should be done. That is much more that has been done so far to protect our children. I cannot start in a different way. I understand that I am quite monotonous because I have to remember that the premise to all this discussion is that the internet and the digital ecosystem metaverse are not designed to be for children. This is central because one thing is this project by design, as we say in the GDPR approach. We have to design a context, an ecosystem that is just for a certain type of users, so for a certain target. And it's a completely different way to try and adjust to minors, something that was not conceived, was not designed for them initially. And we should never forget in our exercise that internet is open to younger children as a market. Internet is internet for the market, for platform, for gaming. This is what is opened to smaller children. And in this dimension of environmental ecosystem, small children are users like adults. They are just numbers, account number, passwords, and massive sources of personal data. It is perhaps a cynical approach, but I think it's rather objective. Within the database of use of a large platform, there is a big list of data. There are many data for all users that access it. So I think that the starting point of our afternoon reflection should always be the same. We should at least do our best for the present and for the future that we call metaverse, even if we know that this is still an entity that it has to be yet defined. So we have to do our best so that in this internet that was not conceived for children, children can only access areas that are made in their image, let's put it this way, so that are conceived for them, appropriate for them. And I think that the central topic can be summarized with two main words, that is to say universe, world, and age verification. That is to say we have to verify age of users, and gateway should be open only for those who have at least the minimum age envisaged by the relevant platform. Those who do not have that age and access platform, at that point, there is nothing that institution, families, schools, association can do to guarantee that child a experience in using that service that may be safe. I often make the example of the um, merry-go-round when you are not in the right size for that particular train or card or whatever, even if you wear a safety belt, if you make a ride on a roller coaster, you perhaps can lose your life because the safety belt is not designed for that age or for that height. So if age verification is question number one to be discussed by all the institutions, I want to be frank and open. Age verification means that we have to verify age, and verify age has nothing to do, especially in digital world, with verification of identity. I don't want to uh, really worsen the situation. This might happen if we think that we can solve the problem by obliging platform user uh, to certain regulations. So we have to verify age and not identity. What should we do and what is the solution? I am strongly convinced that the solution is at least that of using the same algorithm that the large platforms are using to suggest differential contents for children who are 8, 11, 15, or 18. If we have this technology for merchants, this technology can be also given to the user and benefit of a noble objective like this one. So to close the gateway or accompany those who entered wrongly uh, to enter the gateway. We know that children try to enter and access the platform by declaring a different age. Age gate is not the final solution if it's based only on user statement. So nobody can really say, well, but I asked their age. Every child can cheat. And so they know how to bypass. If they say that 13 years of age is the minimum age, they declare 13 years. There are different solutions. Yes, I think that this will be discussed in the afternoon. There is a so-called protected anonymity, the third guarantor that is given the age and identity and can guarantee by disclosing the age. I think this is a possible approach that we should analyze. And of course, this trusted third party should not only be trusted, but should be independent and not a merchant, because if the third party is operating in the same market, I think that the problem is not really radically solved. And we go back to the perverse cycle of identification of age and identity. Last but not least, and I'll try and be short because we already had a thick day, a thick agenda, so I'll try and be short. As I said this morning, I'll spend an extra minute to explain it, but children as adults pay for their life experience in the digital world. it is so it is really something we don't like for adults, and it is even worse for children who have to give their data. Uh, there are two reasons. First, we see with the pandemic, so that is to say, being part of the world is part and parcel of their natural development as a child, and therefore it is as if we expect that they have to pay to something to pay it all to go down and play on the street like with other children. But it's even more serious because children, and I say it as a data protection authority, we are not able to explain to a child who is 4, 5, 6, 7 years old how important are their personal data, how valuable they are. Explaining the intangible data is something difficult. Explaining their personal identity is almost impossible. So what is happening today is that children exchange their personal identity, whose value is unknown to them, with access to uh, a cartoon or the right to talk online with other children, and sometimes even to study. So this is an exchange of values, their personal identity, which is a fundamental right that is very difficult to explain, for something whose value is unknown. Nobody told them what is the cost of what is a monthly fee of TikTok, or how much would they have to pay for another application. So to be very concrete and down to Mother Earth, I think that there are two things that should be done urgently. First is trying and be as transversal as possible. I know that in Europe we have different cultures, and we have a different approach to the civil rights and civil code. But we have to write a European legislation declaring that children are incapable to sign a contract whose price is represented by personal data. Because if we do not write it black and white, and we accept that children accept to pay with their data for a service, problems will never be solved. Perhaps this is applied in some countries, but we need a European universal declaration. The second approach to this problem is represented by a strict no, as we say in the Digital Service Act, say no to the idea that personal children's data can be profiled. This morning, some great platforms, big platforms, reassured us about the fact that they do not profile usually children. We take act of this with great satisfaction. We take stock of it, but this is something that is not up to the decision of a platform that can decide one way or the other, and should be enshrined in the uh, declaration of the European Union, of the legislation of each individual country. Children's data cannot be profiled for commercial purposes, because once the child is targeted and profiled, that child has given up forever his or her freedom in the on-life dimension, either here or there. In the world of bits and atoms, the child will no longer be free, because mm, uh, their approaches, their preferences are well known to service providers, better known than uh, him or his parents. So age verification is a massive campaign. So verifying, not verifying age, this is a battle to really ban data exchange of children for services. I think this can be done. The Safe Internet Day is an ambitious day. We set an ambitious objective. Thank you. Thank you, Guido. Thank you for really giving us concrete examples. And now we have to give concrete examples where actual rights can really implement in the digital world. I like the fact that you said that no solution is technological, as the electronic data providers spend a lot of money in investments of finding an algorithm that can profile users. It is very important the same is done to guarantee that these services are not used by minors for illegit purposes. There were some changes in the panel. Now, because of time, I will give the floor to Laura Arìa, Authority for Communication Guarantees, AGCOM. Please don't speak more than 5 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to this important day. To the topic, I think in 2022, it will be a significant milestone given the regulations that were defined and that will be issued at national and European level. The new directive 1828 of the Council that what changes were adopted. It's a new approach that focuses on the main role played by individuals that cannot be controlled by a platform. And this paved the way to other legislation. And it's not only services for the traditional platform, but also services on demand. We're sorry, the sound is very poor, very glitchy connection. So video sharing in considers the what the Court of Justice decided. And in fact, the mic is not working. We're sorry you cannot hear what you say. There is some problem. I think the mic is working. Now it's slightly better. Is it better? Can you hear me better? Yes, now it's better. Thank you. Okay, so the directive is covering all the services whose main objective is supplying videos generated by users, and the platform editor has no responsibility, but uses algorithm or other system. Sorry, the sound is very bad. To deliver the service to the public. What does it mean? It means that the platform are given the task to do things that were envisaged in a previous legislation for classic television, and therefore it is accountability of platform that are used by a large public and not only peer-to-peer system, and therefore they have a responsibility in designing their algorithm. This is not clear because in our country we just transposed a legislation, but we know that in the future these concepts should be better defined. Sorry, we cannot understand what the speaker says. And therefore, what does the single text do? It transposes the directive and implements some enforcement measures for the protection of minors and their rights not to be treated as commodity. And this is done for audiovisuals and commercial communication ads, because also ads on network, on the web, even if they are not used for commercial purposes, must comply with this regulation about minor protection. Therefore, awareness building is important about the ads offered by the web that should not harm children, including gambling, that is, of course, banned by the new legislation. Platform must therefore adopt measures to provide appropriate mechanisms to protect individual and personal rights. I agree with what a colleague Scorza said. Minors' data should not be used. Their data should not be profiled, but this is an obligation enshrined in this directive that has to be transposed in the platform systems. The legislator chooses one way to reach this objective, that is co-regulation. Co-regulation is more than auto-regulation or self-regulation that we had so far, because it is based on a virtuous consultation of action, and it is supervised, and platforms say we have some protection systems and we have an internal oversight. This is not correct, because oversight and supervision should be external. And if the rules are infringed upon, something must be done. And all this is accompanied by a new system of controversy with platforms, and that is managing this complex system, responsibility towards minors, design of platforms that protect fundamental rights of children. One of the leitmotif of the community is that all what is banned offline must be banned also online. The new single code that is going to be implemented, and our authority was entrusted with this implementation, so was anticipated by Article 7 bis of law number 28, then introduced parental control, and therefore the need to have filtering inappropriate contents, and the filter should be enabled by default. The authority has issued this rule that is therefore introducing protection mechanisms even on smartphones. And this should be done in a public consultation. Sorry, please, can you close, because you have 1 minute left. So we launched this public consultation. We hope to have interesting contribution, and we are committed and transposition. This is possible thanks to what we have done and also thanks to the association protecting minors' interest and rights. And we hope that the result will really be the expected one. Thank you very much. The sun was really terrible. Thank you very much, and thank you for committing to the time.
Thank you very much. When we speak of digital, of course, with video sharing platforms, this environment has dramatically changed the digital scenario, allowing users to upload content by themselves. And this, of course, brings some challenges. And European Union, before this act, has enacted the directive, Media Services Directive, which is regulating this field. And on that occasion, thanks to the intervention of European Parliament, several specific measures have been introduced to protect minors against the profiling and targeting that Guido Scorza was referring to. But they did more in terms of broadcasting. For example, commercials should not be shown that encourage children to purchase food or drinks rich in certain substances or alcohol, for example. Now, there have been some changes to our agenda. Now, I will leave the floor to Izzy Wick, who is the Director of Fight Rights, and you are connected, right? You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Emilio. And thank you very much to Telefono Azzurro for hosting this discussion today, particularly on Safer Internet Day, which we're also celebrating here in the UK, where I'm joining from. First, I'd like to apologize. I don't speak Italian, but I will speak slowly to allow for the translation. So my name is Izzy Wick. I'm the Director of Policy at the Five Rights Foundation. Five Rights is an NGO headquartered in London. We have an office in Brussels, headed up by my colleague Leanda, who is also here today. And at Five Rights, our mission is to build the digital world that young people deserve. We work on issues of child data protection and privacy, how services are designed to meet the rights and needs of children, and how children's rights can be embedded, protected, and upheld in the digital environment. So there's no doubt that the growth of the tech sector has come at a price for children. For the last decade, at the very least, companies have put their commercial interests ahead of the safety and security of users, and regulation of these new digital products and services has lagged behind the pace of technological development. But the digital world is not optional for children, as Guido said, even more so since the pandemic. But now across the world, and especially in Europe, we're seeing new rules being introduced to give children better protections. Just today, we had a long overdue announcement in the UK that pornography companies will need to use age verification to stop children seeing adult material. So children participate in a digital environment which is built by adults for adults, in which they're faced with some really challenging experiences, which they don't have the developmental capacity to navigate. And this is happening every single day and for many, many hours in the day. And we see the impact of this in our schools, in our homes, in doctors' surgeries, hospitals, and through tragic headlines in the media. But these technologies are 100% engineered and human-made, and they can be optimized for any outcome. They can be optimized for profit, for growth, for commercial surveillance, or they can be optimized for child safety. But without regulation that is properly enforced, these profit-driven and data-hungry companies will not prioritize the safety of their users, but continue to put their own commercial interests before children's well-being. And we know that good regulation does work. I'd like to share some of the changes and progress we've seen over the last year as a result of new data protection regulation here in the UK. So the Age Appropriate Design Code came into force in the UK last September. It's the first comprehensive set of rules for the protection of children's data anywhere in the world. It requires digital services that are likely to be accessed by children, which includes social media, games, connected toys, and it requires them to offer children a high bar of privacy by default. So the code has 4 underlying principles. The first is that a child is a person under 18. This may seem really obvious, but thanks to some US legislation, children are often considered adults at the age of 13, whereas in line with the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, a child is anyone under the age of 18. The second principle is that children must be protected wherever they are online, not only where we would like them to be. So services and scope of this code are those that are likely to be accessed by children, which means that the presence of a child on that service is more probable than not, or could be reasonably expected. The third principle is that products and services must consider the privacy and protection of children by design and default. So that means that privacy is baked in to how these services are designed. And finally, that in the event of a conflict of interest between a service and the child user, the child's best interest should always be prioritized. So that's to say, if there's ever a conflict between a commercial objective of a company and the well-being of a child, the child's well-being will always take precedence. So the code is a set of 15 separate standards that offer this high bar of protection. And they include things like restricting data collection and sharing, and also limiting the use of data in any way that is detrimental to a child. So that includes the use of algorithms to push harmful material. The standard also requires high privacy settings by default. So things like switching off location settings and prohibiting the use of nudge techniques, which might encourage children to lower their privacy settings. It also mandates the primacy of the child's best interests, as I mentioned, which requires companies to take a risk-based approach to children, including when it comes to assessing their age through age assurance tools. And finally, it demands transparency and age-appropriate published terms. So making sure that things like terms of use and privacy policies, as well as reporting tools, are presented in age-appropriate formats that a child can understand. So since this regulation came into force, we've seen a whole load of changes from really big tech companies to the way that their services operate. And not just in the UK where the code applies, but actually across the world. So I'll give just a few examples. Google have made Safe Search their default browsing mode for all under 18s. YouTube have turned off autoplay for child accounts, and break and bedtime reminders are turned on by default. TikTok and Instagram, 2 of the biggest social media companies, have disabled direct messaging between children and adults that they don't follow. And finally, TikTok doesn't use notifications after 9 p.m. for children aged between 13 and 15, and after 10 p.m. for 16 and 17-year-olds. So these are just some of the changes, and there are lots more, especially as we see companies make more moves to complying with this regulation. But there's still a good deal to do. And these changes have caught the eyes of policymakers internationally, who are now replicating some or all of the code that we have in the UK elsewhere. In European Union, both at the bloc level and in member states, including the Netherlands, Sweden, France, and Ireland, also in Australia. And I know the European Data Protection Board has begun work on guidelines for children's data protection, which look to clarify GDPR and harmonise enforcement. These guidelines should follow the code in ensuring that children are given the highest level of privacy and safety by design and by default, as required by General Comment 25 on children's rights in relation to the digital environment, as well as the EU Strategy on the Rights of the Child. I know we're short on time, so I'd just like to speak very briefly about age assurance before I hand over. But I'd like to say first that I think age assurance is a widely misunderstood term, and I'm sure others will have views on this, but we describe it as any system that estimates or verifies the age or age range of the user. So it's a broad term that includes systems of age verification and age estimation. And we know that age assurance is increasingly being required by governments around the world as online safety regulations come into force. It's required to implement the GDPR properly, but also the Audiovisual Media Services Directive that's been mentioned, and it will be required under the forthcoming DSA rules, the AI Act, and no doubt more. So what's in question is not whether we should have age assurance. That ship has sailed, but it's what kind of age assurance we want and how it should be used. The technology exists and is rapidly improving, from things like biometrics to AI. What we don't have is standards to ensure that these technologies are developing in line with principles of privacy, security, and efficacy. And for this, what's really needed is a regulatory framework to accompany statutory requirements to establish a benchmark, a set of minimum standards for these systems to ensure that users trust that they are effective. So any system of age assurance, regardless of the technology, must be secure, must be effective, and it must protect the privacy of users by taking no more information than is needed to establish age. It must also be proportionate to risk. We don't want to live in a world where a child has to present their passport to use an app designed for kids, but equally, we want robust age verification measures for adult sites, such as pornography. And I'll just finish by saying age assurance is not a silver bullet that will fix every problem of the digital world, but without it, I think it'll be very difficult to deliver the promises and protections to children under new regulations. So I will leave it there, but thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
L'ultima, vorrei chiedere di avviarti alle conclusioni. Ah, ok. Sì. Se è possibile, l'ultima battuta di conclusione.
Sorry, would you like to close? Hello, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I was just wondering if you can go to the conclusion since we are running out of time.
Can you go to the conclusion since we are running out of time? But I think you have concluded, right? Yeah.
Okay. Grazie mille. Allora, adesso
Thank you so much. Okay, so we have seen that. Thank you so much for rights to be a very important partner for us in the Intergroup in Brussels and to have underlined the importance of age verification tools that that entail cooperation with the enterprises. Now I will leave the floor to Stefania Giannini. No, Stefania Giannini was not able to join us, so she will be replaced. She will be replaced by Christopher Castle, Chief of UNESCO, right? Christopher, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to join you virtually today, representing UNESCO's Assistant Director General for Education, Ms. Stefania Giannini, who, as you just heard, is unfortunately not able to be with us today. I will share some insights into UNESCO's work to tackle online violence and cyberbullying so that every child can navigate safely online and reap the full benefits that the internet can offer, including enhanced access to quality education. 1/3 of the world's internet users are children, defined by the United Nations as anyone under the age of 18. As countries are responding to COVID-19 at various stages, the lives and education of children across the world have increasingly moved online, as we know. While digital spaces offer new possibilities in terms of connection and remote learning, they may also put children increasingly at risk of online violence. The education sector has a significant role to play in preventing and addressing these risks. Although global data is limited, evidence shows us that cyberbullying has been on the rise in various regions during the epidemic. In Europe, 44% of children who experienced cyberbullying prior to COVID-19 reported that it had increased during lockdowns. Data from several countries also reveals that children, in particular girls at the age of 11 to 13 years, are increasingly at risk of being targeted by online sexual predators. Online violence, including cyberbullying, has negative consequences for the education, health, and well-being of learners who are victims, and therefore it also undermines the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goal 4 on quality education for all. Global data shows us that children who are frequently bullied at school and online are nearly 3 times more likely to feel like an outsider at school and more than twice as likely to miss school as those who are not frequently bullied. Children who are bullied have worse educational outcomes than children who do not. As the lead agency responsible for the implementation of SDG 4, UNESCO has been supporting countries to strengthen their response to violence in schools. To effectively prevent and address online violence, including cyberbullying, UNESCO recommends that a holistic approach is taken, referred to as the whole school approach. This means not only helping children who are victims of online bullying, but also ensuring that the entire education system is better prepared and equipped to prevent and address cyberbullying. The whole school approach recognizes the interconnectedness of the school with the wider community and calls for a coordinated response between all the concerned stakeholders. In November of last year, UNESCO and its partners marked for the second year the International Day Against Violence and Bullying at School, including cyberbullying, under the theme Tackling Cyberbullying and Other Forms of Online Violence Involving Children and Young People. So by bringing together the community of practitioners, researchers, and education stakeholders under this theme, we want to increase global awareness of the problem of online violence and cyberbullying, its consequences, and the need to put an end to it. UNESCO, along with other UN agencies and partners, is part of international efforts to eliminate violence in schools and violence against children in general. As part of its role in the Power of Zero initiative, UNESCO contributes to the development of the activities to help young children learn positive online behaviors, which underscores how kindness matters as much online as offline. Through our role in the Safe to Learn initiative, UNESCO has joined the international campaign Stay Safe at Home, Stay Safe Online, through which big tech companies such as Twitter and Facebook provided tips to children to stay safe online. Whether through our normative role, our technical expertise on the subject, or through our efforts to strengthen partnerships, UNESCO has consistently underscored and demonstrated that preventing and addressing online violence cannot be done in silos, but is a matter of shared responsibility between students, parents, members of the educational community, education authorities, and a range of sectors and planners, including the tech industry. All of you today are probably part of one of these categories of actors, and we count on your strong support to help us raise global awareness on this issue, speak out and act against cyberbullying and other forms of online violence. Thank you very much.
Grazie mille a Christophe Castle, grazie mille anche per il lavoro svolto da UNESCO e grazie anche per aver messo in evidenza come effettivamente l'educazione abbia sempre un ruolo vitale.
Thank you for showing how education is vital and important. You spoke about cyberbullying, and the European Parliament is very committed, and it's clear that the internet is a catalyzer for hatred speech and also for discriminatory and violent action on the net, on the web. And this was seen by the European Union. Of course, it requires intervention measures because often children that belong to religious minorities or displaced children are victims. So thank you very much. And now I should give the floor to the Brando Benifei, who could not be with us. He was with us yesterday, and perhaps I can speak on his behalf later on. And therefore, now I would like to give the floor to John Carr, OBE Senior Advisor, ECPAT International. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Emilio, for the introduction, and thank you very much indeed, Telefono Azzurro, for inviting me to speak. Again, I don't speak Italian. I very much regret. Italy is one of my favorite countries. I'm speaking to you from London, but I'm speaking to you on behalf of ECPAT International, which is a global NGO based in Bangkok that has a specific focus on ending child prostitution, child sex trafficking, and matters of that kind. And it has therefore given a great deal of attention to the question of the internet and how that digital technology is facilitating some horrendous harms against children. One of the earlier agendas that I saw for today's meeting asked us to consider the role that institutions can play in helping to keep children safer and enjoy a better life in the digital environment. And one of the things I would like to say to all decision-making institutions is simply this: don't always listen to the loudest voices, because those are really the voices with money behind them. And if you needed any more evidence of that, look at the report that was produced about 3 months ago into the lobbying activities of big tech in Brussels. Big tech is now the biggest single lobbying entity in Brussels. Between them, they employ 1,500 people just to talk to politicians and civil servants in Brussels about digital technology, and they do it because it's in their business interest to do so. And here's the thing: the loudest voices are obviously the ones that politicians are going to hear first, because they can get into the media, they can even buy advertising in the media, but they do not represent the opinions of the great majority of Europeans, the great majority of voters and citizens, the people, in other words, who put politicians into these positions of power. And so I think it's really important, although it's easy to listen to the loud voices, it's really, really important that we listen to the majority voices. Now, we as ECPAT International, we have national chapters in 14 EU member states, and we conducted some opinion research in 8 member countries: Austria, France, Germany, Holland, Hungary, Italy, Spain, and Sweden. And we did it in a very scientific way. So first of all, we convened focus groups to talk to a cross-section of adults, parents and non-parents, about what they knew and understood about technology and the way it was impacting children's lives. And one of the questions that we asked them in these focus groups in each of these 8 EU member states was, are you aware that technical tools exist that can help keep children safe when they go on the internet? Overwhelmingly, they said no. And by the way, 73% of all of the people that we spoke to believed at the moment it was impossible for a child to go on the internet without putting themselves in some degree of danger. So we then said to the same groups of people in these 8 countries, now that you know, because we've just told you that these technical tools exist which can help keep children safer in the internet space, do you think companies should be using them? Massively. The people said, of course they should. This is about the protection of children. If tools exist, and age verification is one of those tools, if tools exist that can help keep children safe on the internet, then not only should companies be able to use them, they should be legally compelled and required to use them. So I think it's important to bear that in mind. And that was true in every one of the 8 countries. We were getting percentages over 70% saying, if these tools exist, if these technical means of protecting children exist, then they should be mandatory, they shouldn't be voluntary. But if you listen to some of the voices, some of the privacy lobby, some of the who are often funded and financed by big tech, if you listen to them, you would never, ever get that impression. You would never hear that kind of opinion being expressed. So, so that's one of the things that I really think is crucially important. And the European Union is soon going to be bringing forward some new legislation on strategies to protect children from child sexual exploitation. And when that legislation comes forward later this year, I think by the end of March, we can expect to see the draft. I think it will be very, very important for politicians in national governments and in the European Parliament to pay attention to what the citizens of Europe think, not just the paid lobbyists and what they think, because their opinions are not the same, not even close. I'll just tell you very briefly, Emilio, can you, I'm okay for a couple of minutes, am I? If you just nod your head. Yeah, okay. Okay, so I've been involved with age verification for nearly 20 years. I know I look as if I'm only in my early 30s, but actually I'm a little bit older than that. So here in Britain, around 2003, 2004, children, we got parents getting in touch with us as children's organizations because their children, typically boys 13, 14, 15 years of age, had been diagnosed as gambling addicts. That's to say that they developed a compulsive behavior, which meant they were betting, and they were betting on the internet. They were going onto gambling websites, ticking a box to say, I am 18, and then blowing their pocket money on a horse or a football match or something of that kind. Children in those days in Britain, and it's true in many countries, could get debit cards, not credit cards, but debit cards. And lots of parents, including us, me and my wife, would pay their children's pocket money into their bank account, and then they could spend it using their plastic online or in shops equally. But what these young boys were doing, because they were addicts, they were then stealing money from their family or stealing items from their family and friends, converting it into cash, putting it back into their bank account so they could go back online and gamble again. We went to see all of the gambling companies in Britain and said, this is wrong. You are supposed to be 18 before you can gamble in any venue here. And they all said the same thing. Yes, we're very aware of this. It's a very serious problem. We take it very seriously. But the truth was they did nothing. They did nothing until Parliament passed a new law in 2005 that became operative on the 1st of September 2007 that said this: if you want to run a gambling website in the United Kingdom from now on, you will only get a license to do so if you can demonstrate to the Gambling Commission that you have age verification in place. Since that new law became operative on the 1st September 2007, we have not heard of a single case, not one, where a child has been able to go to a gambling website.
John, per favore, l'ultimo minuto.
Okay, tick a box to say that I'm 18. And on the technology, you've got a speaker coming on after me who's much more expert in these things. I was in a webinar the other day with a guy from North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany. They have validated and evaluated 80 different technologies for proving a child's age. There are no technical challenges in this field, none whatsoever. Thank you.
Grazie mille, John.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you for these focus groups and citizens sometimes are not involved. I don't know what is happening, and it's very important that organization like ECPAT carries out these type of initiatives and gives a voice to citizens. And thank you also for focusing on the connection with online payment that are very much used by children. And others were mentioning this aspect as well. And now the floor goes to Julie Dawson, who is Director of Regulatory Policy, Yoti. You have the floor. Last but
Thank you very much for the invitation to join you all today on Safer Internet Day. Thank you, Telefono Azzurro. I am Julie Dawson, Director of Regulatory and Policy from Yoti. We're a digital identity platform which enables people to prove who they are or how old they are, face-to-face and online. On the flip side, we enable organizations to prove and check who people are or how old they are. Sadly, up until recently, the majority of social media, gaming, and live stream platforms haven't really had age verification controls. And As many of you know, last year in Italy, there was a very sad case of a young lady who died in a TikTok challenge. Many of us asked, how can children be better protected online? And not just protected, how can children thrive online? How can the experience children have online be right for them, be age appropriate? How can platforms, once they know they're dealing with a child, turn off geolocation, turn off notifications late at night, provide support in a language that children can understand, avoid nudge techniques? Well, all of this they can do once they know they're dealing with a child, if they're able to assess a child's age. So, how has the age verification industry evolved to meet this challenge? Well, the first industry to look at this area about a decade ago was the gambling industry, but this was more identity checking, know your customer checks, anti-money laundering, and was identity-based. The next industry where data minimized age checking was considered was around adult content. And back in 2018, the first age checking standard was developed called the PAS 1296 in the UK. Wind forward a few years, and now we have 11 countries around the world where there are laws somewhere on the statute book around age checking for adult content. You have Canada, New Zealand, Australia, France, Germany, the UK, Poland, South Africa, Philippines, Ireland, and hopefully Italy. As well as this, but there's been an evolution picking up from the excellent work from Five Rights of children's codes, where lots of countries are looking at how can we require platforms to deal and to design from the ground up age appropriately for their users. So the UK, Ireland, Netherlands, Australia all have different flavors of children codes evolving, and no doubt more to follow. Thanks to the EU Consent Project, and you heard from John Carr just before, there are now international standards developing for age checking through the IEEE and ISO, and we also have, thanks to Baroness Kidron from Five Rights, a set of minimum standards around age verification. There are interoperable approaches being developed, and also audit bodies specializing in checking these audits, such as the Age Check Certification Scheme. So what does Yoti do in all this? Well, in the last years, we've developed a whole range of different ways for organizations across lots of sectors, gambling, adult content, e-commerce, gaming, dating, retail, all to help users prove their age. And in short, we've done over 500 million age checks. So what ways are there, not just at Yoti, but in the industry as a whole, to do this? I'll try and give you an overview of the landscape and the three main categories. The oldest one was assertion or self-declaration. I say I'm over 18, or maybe my parent says I'm over 13. These are pretty weak, to be honest. The second stage was looking at documents, either a document presented there and then, passport, driving license, identity card, or a historic check, relying on a check once upon a time done to set up a bank account, or a credit card, or a mobile phone account, and then relying on those checks later downstream. And the third category is human-based checks, often done with artificial intelligence, such as looking at a face and analyzing to assess age, with voice, with the language that's written, or looking at your activity and friends online. But not all age checks are created equal, and there are ways to circumvent which have to be looked at. A big question is, how do you bind the person to the check? And some do not. How do you link to the individual? If a check is knowledge-based, that can easily be shared and then misused. Some require a person to be live and a liveness check done to see that it's a real person and not a video or a still image. And with a document, you actually have to check the authenticity for it to be worthwhile. Platforms are operating globally, so a challenge for them is how to meet all the different laws and the different legal bars in different countries. So the legal bar might be it's illegal to sell a good or for a person of a certain age to access content or buy a good. Or it might be that content shouldn't normally be accessible to someone under a certain age, or simply that an organization has written into its terms of service that that is just for under 13s or over 13s. At Yoti, what we've done is to put together 6 different methods, which are flexible and configurable for each country. So the organization can then give consumers choice. They can require a liveness check. There can be automated document checks, and those can be supplemented with human checks where that's needed. So let me give you a whistle-stop tour of the methods. So the first and the most popular one that we're finding for both consumers and with platforms is the facial age estimation, where the user simply looks into their camera and the algorithm assesses their age and the image is instantly deleted. Crucially, there's no unique recognition, either one-to-one or one-to-many of any person. It just assesses the age and then provides an age estimate to the platform. You might ask, how accurate is it? Well, within 1.55 years for 13 to 19-year-olds, and even more accurate, 1.28 years for 6 to 12-year-olds. And there's more in our white paper if you're interested. The second method is looking at reusable digital identity wallets. And with this, there's the 3 to 5 minute setup. In the case of the Yoti app, you're adding a mobile number, creating a code, and then add, for instance, your Italian identity card. We encrypt each detail, shard them separately, and put the private key on the secure module of your device. And after that, repeatedly, you can just share an over 18 or just share an over 13. The other method is if you don't want to set up a separate app, an organization might have its own app, is to allow an age check one-off in the flow of uploading once your identity document and just the over 18 to be shared to enable a one-off check. The other 3 methods are more linked with data and historic knowledge-based checks, such as, were you over 18 setting up a credit card? Were you over 18 opening a mobile phone contract? Or checks to credit reference or databases such as, are you registered to vote? However, the method we're finding the most straightforward and growing is that of the facial age estimation. So I hope that's provided a useful whistle-stop tour. Please do let me know if you have any more questions, either in person or via email to julie.dawson@yoti.com, or if you would like to write or speak in Italian, my colleague valentina.dotto@yoti.com. Thank you so much.
Grazie mille Giulia, grazie mille anche per aver citato
Thank you, Julie, and thank you for giving us concrete examples. And this is very important, and it shows once again how technology can be implemented. This was the last speaker. I would like to thank you. I would like to thank the organizer. Let's proceed to the next panel, and thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Recording in progress.
Versione italiana. Loro se sentono in inglese